This is Woman Being Podcast, and the long-awaited first rendition of Not Your Mom's Book Club is here, finally. Very excited to be with you both here today, Kellyanne and Emma.
Thank you, Kelly.
We are so happy to be here.
And we are about to dive into our first book review of the season. The book is Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and we'll dive right into that in a second. This is Woman Being,
where we explore thoughts and opinions.
And have the freedom to change our minds.
Without expectation or judgment,
we will hold a safe space and support each other
as we navigate together in the form of feminine.
Alrighty then, here we are. Not Your Mom's Book Club is back, and I want to know the age-old question: what are you ladies drinking today? As if I don't know. Tell the audience, the people, what it is we're having.
For me personally, due to current dietary restrictions, due to non-pregnancy related things, I feel like I always specify this. I'm not drinking alcohol right now. So I have a sparkling mango tea. Mandarin. She knows better than me. Tea situation. She did order it. And that is what I'm drinking.
Sugar-free.
Sugar-free.
With some lemons.
With some lemons.
That's nice.
It's nice and cute.
A nice and cute tea situation.
Yeah.
I have a nice and cute gin and tonic situation from a canned gin and tonic. And I have a lemon wedge from my earlier beverage to spice it up.
For aesthetic reasons.
Yes.
I also am drinking a canned gin and tonic today with Emma. We shared it. So, and I also have a lemon from my previous beverage.
A lemon from my beverage. We needed to just give them a little pizzazz.
Yeah.
So,
and also because we put
for
it
this
in,
very visual
medium.
medium.
For anyone watching via not video, for anyone not watching,
For
and
anyone
listening
just
only,
listening.
it pretty much just looks like a glass of sparkling water. Like it's just a clear beverage. So we
which is
had
what
to put some lemons in so
gin and
that
tonic is.
it looked like it was something.
Yeah. Totally.
So now it looks like sparkling water with a lemon in it.
Because this is this is a podcast about alcohol and book reviews.
Yes.
So
That's
So we had to do what we had to do. Anyways, the book that I chose for this week's review is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. For anyone not familiar, this book is a memoir by the person who was assaulted by Brock Turner. And she basically lays out her, side of events and the things that led up to the assaults and the things that she went through during the trial and afterward. And with that, we want to give a standard, solid trigger warning because we are going to be discussing sexual assault, rape, trials. That could be a whole trauma in and of itself. And we're also going to be talking about Brock Turner, and his name in and of itself is sometimes hard to swallow. So, so this book, is there anything I'm missing? I think that's kind of the summation of it.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks for me.
Yeah. I think that it is her sort of standing up and giving her side of events when she didn't really get that opportunity as a victim in a trial.
Yeah. And her name is pretty much just covered as Emily Doe the whole time, or that's how she's referred to.
Yes, so, she's anonymous throughout the trial. So this is her coming out and saying, this is me.
Mm-hmm.
Brock Turner got an identity throughout the entire event, and she did not. She was anonymous, partly for protecting the victim, obviously, but she has decided to come forward.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the stake in the ground that she's putting out there with this book.
Yeah. So I guess to get started, what did you guys think?
What did I think?
What did you think?
It's a stunning book. Horrible and hard to read, but I feel like she's very eloquent and very, clear that she's done a ton of work because she is able to write about such an emotional event and set from such an emotional place, but also be like, I don't know that Brock Turner is a bad person. Like, I don't agree with him. I hope he gets better, but also like, this is my story. And so I felt like she really walked a delicate line, and I was actually surprised by how well she did that. Whew. I think the things that stick out to me mostly are how little she was educated as she was going through this process about the system. Like, people just assume people know about things like this. It's like when you walk into something like a Kinko's, for example. Maybe Kinko's is a bad example. Maybe like a FedEx store. And they're
I was
like,
gonna say, I've never, ever been to a Kinko's.
well,
what do they even do?
it's a
For all of our audience listeners above the age of 45, Kinko's. For anyone else, maybe a FedEx.
Yeah, but they're like, well, exactly what paper do you want? And like, what about this? And what about this? And like printing.
For printing?
Yeah. So Kinko's is
Gotcha.
like
Print and sending stuff store.
Yeah.
A print and sending
listen,
store.
like an
my
Office
parents
Max.
used to take me. So it's like the thing that came to mind. But like, when people start asking you questions about a field you're just like know nothing about because you're a normal human, like it's just like, why do you just assume I know all these things? And I think that's what was probably the most upsetting thing to me about this whole process for her, is that no one really seemed to stop and take the time to be like, here's what will happen. Here's the like events that will unfold. Here are some resources to help support you. It felt like everyone just kind of expected her to like figure it out. And I'm like, whoa. Like, that feels so unjust to me. And so I think that was really shocking, as well as what I loved how she illuminated the experiences of her loved ones as well, like her family, her sister, her friends, her boyfriend. And I think that's something that people don't think about as much or talk about maybe as much, is the impact that things like sexual assault have on not just the person who has been assaulted, but also their immediate circle of friends and loved ones. And that is almost like its own trauma in and of itself. So overall, I think she's a wonderful woman. And I would be friends with you.
She doesn't live too far away,
I
just down in San
know.
Francisco.
I'm like, let's go say hi.
So I'm sure she would
Palo Alto.
love some strange girls showing up at her house.
Absolutely, with microphones. Like,
Yeah.
would you like to interview?
She'd be like, no,
No, get away.
Get away. I really loved the book. I think this is one of my favorite books we've read for book club. And I think I had pretty low expectations. I think I thought, this is going to be just about the sexual assault that happened. But it's about so much more.
Mm-hmm.
And she's so beautifully and masterfully knits together all of these stories that maybe seem tangential at first, but really tie into this entire grieving, healing, and being re-victimized process. And it's stunning. Like, I feel like there's like life lessons in this book that you come away with. And there's so much of seeing the inner workings inside her mind and what it's like to be a victim in a situation like this. And to then like come out on the other side. And she like gives insight into what it looks like to survive sexual assault. And it's incredible. And I cried like every chapter at least. At least once every chapter I cried.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's so good.
And she's such an incredible writer. Like, I really have to give you a shout out, Chanel, because your craft of the writing process was just incredible. And I felt like I was being kind of like babied into this very difficult, horrible situation that you were put in, but you like softened it almost in a way that felt like it felt like a warm, tender hand leading me along through the process of some things that are very gruesome and very awful. Not to soften it like to sugarcoat it at all, but yeah, it's like having a warm presence beside you as you're reading, and she just did that so well. And her memory of some of the details of the most random things was so incredible to me. And I think at the end, when she reads her kind of not her closing statement, but this sort of response to the sentencing of Brock.
Her victim statement?
Yes. Yeah. Like, you can see it there. Like, even then, she was definitely brilliant. And so that's one of my favorite things about a good read, is when the writing also sort of takes you along. So that was amazing. What I loved was an opportunity to hear her side of the story, because I think we all are familiar with what happened with Brock Turner. We're all angry about the injustice of it, but because she was anonymous, no one really knew this person. And I think she does really well what she attempts to do, which is kind of to say, hey, I'm a human, this like victim that the world has known. She actually has a name. And so I thought it was brilliant, which is why I wanted you guys to read it, and which is why we're reviewing it today. So I can't gush about it too much, because very clearly I liked it. But did you guys identify with anything you read, or was there anything particularly enlightening to you?
I think, unfortunately, a lot of women would resonate and identify with a lot of what you would read in this book, which is unfortunate. I mean, I think everything from sexual harassment to sexual assault to trauma from, like, literally just living in a woman's body and, like, being told, no, you can't, or having your motives questioned at all times, or, you know, fill in the blank, the amount, like, women experience trauma going through everyday life. And so I think just hearing her be so eloquent about her experience, I think for me, it helped put to words some of the feelings I have felt throughout my life. I think the thing about this book that is so well illuminating, that is also equally the most upsetting thing, is just basically how she was treated as a woman versus how Brock was treated.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, she walks through so much of the trial, and literally the stark difference of, like, here are all the horrible things that happened to me, and here is the physical damage that was happening, and now the emotional trauma and the anxiety and all of the things that have happened, versus, like, well, he's his potential.
Yep.
And he's promising, and he's never been, you know, violent, like all these things. And I'm like, that actually doesn't change what happened, yet it is an argument that is used in court day in and day out to justify men's actions or excuse them.
Yep.
And I think that is the thing that was the hardest for me to read. While a woman sits there and is saying, hey, this graphic, horrible, unquestionable thing happened to me. There were witnesses. There was the full, like, they did like a quote unquote rape kit on her. So, like, they have documented every single inch of her body. They know what was in her. They know, like, they know everything that was in her hair. I mean, just to the fine detail. And it's still a question, I think, is what is hard to grasp.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to say at this time about that.
Yeah, I think, like, the blatant disbelief of women when they're assaulted plays a huge role. And one thing that was, I guess, impactful about this case was it was finally the case where the guy was guilty, but it took all of those things for him to get that sentencing, and then still he was in jail for 3 months. County jail?
County jail for 3 months.
Yeah.
Because her words were twisted, because she didn't have the information about how to operate in this foreign system.
Yeah.
You know, because the woman that calls her and asks basically like, what do you think Brock's sentencing should be like? And she talks about how she wants him to feel better, like to get better. And she talks about how she wants him to go to jail. And the woman's like, well, so you want him to go to jail, not prison. And she's like, wait, what's the difference?
Yeah.
Which to me, like, such an easy mistake to make. Like, I
Yep.
think people very commonly use jail and prison
They 100% do.
Yeah. And so the fact that her words were twisted in that way, and then they turned around and said, well, see, she wants him to get better. She doesn't want him to be stuck in prison. And she's like, wait, that's not actually what I was trying to say here. And she even talks about how that links to her upbringing as a woman, being told like, oh, you should like be softer and not be vindictive. You should not seek revenge. You should seek their good and their betterment, and you need to not react emotionally. And because of that, she's told, well, you weren't that emotional about it, so it obviously didn't affect you.
Yeah. Which, again, is, one, a woman calling her and, like, just being like, what do you want to happen? And, like, I understand that's probably her job, but, like, not really taking the time to, like, explain to her and talk through things with her. And then, again, her DA, which was, seems like a wonderful woman and probably a great person, but she didn't really, she was just like, just say you're writing a victim statement. Not like, oh, this person might be asking, like, what you think this person's sentence should be. Like, that's a very serious, very heavy thing.
Yeah.
And I personally did not know that that's how the legal system works after a trial happens and a verdict is given. I had no idea that it's like, oh, now we're going to try and figure out, like, what do you want to happen? Like, I didn't even think of that part.
Yeah.
And so I think it was rather shocking, actually.
It was shocking that Brock walked out of court that day without handcuffs on.
Very shocking.
You know? I mean, it's shocking, but it's not. Like, he comes from
That's
a
the
wealthy
thing.
family. But it's just like sexual assault survivors go through so much to even get where Chanel was able to get. Like, as far as like the, cacophony of sexual assault cases that exist out there, hers is like at the top because she actually won. She was able to get the justice that she deserved.
Right.
At least in terms of like declaring someone guilty. But like following that, the way that it was handled is still so abysmal.
It's wild.
And we're just going to excuse like a very blatant sexual assault in the public that had several witnesses and give this guy, like, it just, we're still treating this kid like he's a kid.
Yeah. And it's
And
like,
then,
no, you were making adult decisions.
Yeah.
Therefore, you get treated like an adult.
and we're not going to acknowledge the like years of suffering that this victim has been through as a result.
Yeah, that was one of the things that was very a really good way that she explained that dichotomy was how the man is judged based off of his potential, whereas the woman is judged based off of her past. Right? Like, so he's based off a potential future that doesn't exist.
Yep.
It
It's
could
not
change.
happening.
There is no guarantee that he was going to be an Olympic swimmer. Like, there's no guarantee he was going to graduate Stanford. There's no guarantee he was going to get good grades. Like, there's no guarantee of any of these things. But she's looked at, and her future is not talked about. All that's talked about it is, oh, well, you've been blackout drunk before. Well, you partied in college. Well, you've been sexually active. Well, why? Like,
Your boyfriend was away. Why were you out if your boyfriend wasn't with you? Like,
as if she's somehow intrinsically tied to a man, because that's where her value comes from at the end of the day, according to patriarchy.
But yeah, like her future is not considered. That I don't think that's ever a conversation throughout the book in terms of like, these are the things that have been destroyed as a result of this rape trial.
Right.
Right? Like, these are the things that I've missed out on as a human because of what you did to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Like what about losing her job?
Yeah.
What about like not like having to go to therapy? What about all the legal bills? Like, there's so much that piles up on her. What about all of her family members that have been affected?
Yeah. And no one's like, and think about how this will continue to affect her throughout the rest of her life. Like, it's not like it goes away once the trial's over, but everyone's concerned about Brock. And it's like, I'm sorry. I mean, yeah, he's a human.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve to be treated like anything else. But he did a very egregious thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was proven in front of a jury by the court of law. And like, he doesn't get like a free pass because his future could be bright.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's another thing that got to me too, is that because she had no recollection of the night, he was able to make up the narrative, right?
Mhm.
He was able to say, well, maybe she consented because she touched my back. Or he was able to say, well, she didn't seem that drunk to me. Or he was able to say, she wanted me to put my finger inside of her. Or, oh, she fell over, and so that's why she was in the pine needles. And then even able to say, oh, well, I ran away when those men affronted me about being on top of her because I was scared, not because I knew I was doing something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's also allowed to say, well, I was just drunk too. But like, so you're telling me that like she was drunk and able to give all of these moments of consent to you, but that you were drunk and therefore incapable of discerning whether or not she was giving consent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's the
add
double
up.
standard.
It doesn't add up. Which I mean,
is why there was a unanimous guilty verdict.
yeah, to be
Yeah.
fair, I think he was justly, I guess, verdicted, convicted, but unjustly sentenced.
Mhm.
Yes.
Because a judge and a probation officer felt bad for him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah, and that whole just like on like that flood of letters that came from people from his past who were vouching for his character was so frustrating to me, because the thing is he is not being judged on the past 18 years of his life.
Yes.
He's being judged on this one moment. And they would say, well, we can't ruin his life based off this one moment. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's actually the way the justice system
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that our justice system is perfect. It is far from it. But the way that it works is you do a crime and then you have to serve time for your crime.
Yeah.
And like that is the fact of the matter. If you've never murdered someone before, you still have to go to jail when you murdered just one person.
Yeah.
You can
Like-
live an upstanding life. You can have a
Yes.
4.0. You
Yep.
can whatever.
Yeah.
You murder someone, it's still a problem.
Yes.
Whether
So
you're
there's-
drunk or not,
Yeah.
whether the person consented or not, it's still a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is that so often sexual assault is not viewed as severe of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's seen as a lower crime. Or even like within the last 100 years, it used to be that sexual violence or violence against women was just considered a crime of passion. And it was called that because it wasn't seen as like really as severe, as true of an offense.
Yep.
You know? It's like, oh, well, these men are just passionate. And like, how dare they compare like violence to passion?
Yes.
Something that should be a positive, really.
Yes.
And discount the violence against this woman by saying, well, he was just passionate, or
Yep.
he was just worked up, or boys will be boys.
Yep.
Like, it is absolutely ridiculous. And it's part of being in a patriarchal society.
Right.
Yeah.
Which a crime of passion is still a defense used in our court of law to this day. Like a man can be like, it was a crime of passion, and he will get a lighter sentence or potentially not be convicted.
Meanwhile, so like these men are essentially saying I was hysterical, but then women are accused of hysteria and therefore not believed for crimes. Like the double standards are just like it's impossible to count them all because there's so many when it comes to situations like this.
So I think that the reality of women being unheard and disbelieved, and the reality of men being given the benefit of the doubt, like that's relatable to so many women who have experienced sexual assault or who know someone who's experienced sexual assault. I mean, odds are we all know someone who has experienced it, and at some level. What other things resonated with you? Maybe about Chanel's story, or the way that she processed things that you want to share?
I think I really resonated with, I mean, obviously not the same, but I understood like her trying to process what had happened to her, essentially. Just like her being afraid to do things. I'm like, yeah, I understand that. Her being afraid, like having like irrational fears, but her experience has showed her that irrational fear is possible because the unthinkable happened to her. And so I'm like, the process of unraveling that is so slow and is so painful. And it feels like you are breaking while it's happening. I also really resonated with her wanting to like be strong for a really long time. We kind of really watch her like try and just carry on life as normal at first. And then we see her like not want to tell people because she didn't want to bring like, it seemed to me like grief to them or her family. And I'm like, yep, that is oldest child syndrome right there. I get you, girl. And just I think what we really watch unravel is her ability to give herself permission to take up the space she needs. And I think women everywhere have to go through that journey. And whether it is something really horrible like this or another situation, I think we all have almost like a becoming moment. And that process is grueling and it feels like a part of you dies. So I really saw a lot of value watching her walk that out. And I think it's actually really important for people to read stories like this to understand how painful these types of journeys are. Like people aren't just like trying to sit on the couch all the time or like not text you back. It's like, or, you know, not want to go out at night alone or whatever. It's like, no, these people like physically don't have another option in their mind. And so I think it's super valuable to have stories like this, even though it's obviously the worst thing that possibly could happen to someone. Yeah, I think that's what I would say.
Well, I think especially without the memory of what happened, you know, it's almost like her body failed her in a sense.
Yeah.
And this egregious thing happened without her knowledge, really, you know? And so to kind of like not be able to go back and like remember the sequence of events that led to this happening probably feels very ominous and scary. It's like any number of things could happen. Like, and she talks about how it affects her ability to sleep. Like, because when night comes, like she can only sleep in the daytime because she's like afraid of losing consciousness at night. And it's just sort of how your brain kind of protects you from those things.
Yep.
And I feel like not remembering probably, I mean, remembering is probably not great either, but not remembering probably leaves so much to the imagination.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
As your body tries to process what happened.
Totally.
Yeah, she talks about how up to the point of this book being written, she had only slept alone 3 nights ever. like since the assault. And she talks about how she sleeps with all the lights on, how she double checks that all the doors are locked, even barricading doors sometimes, how she would wake up and wonder what she had missed, wonder how long she'd been asleep. She'd be afraid going to parties or whenever she was around people who were drinking that they wouldn't get home okay, and obsessively like making sure that her friends got home safe, and obsessively measuring out all of her drinks whenever she did drink, because she was asked in court, well, how much did you drink exactly? And she's like, we have to know.
Yeah.
And that trauma is like instilled into her. And there's so much fear that's been ingrained into her that her words and her actions will be twisted and used against her, like they were when the defense attorney stood up and like twisted all of her words and twisted all of her rememberings of the night, and would ask her these questions that forced her into a hole.
Yep.
And so she tried to eliminate all holes that could possibly exist in her life. And that's like a torturous reality to think of being in.
But it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It totally does.
Yes, it makes sense as a trauma response, but it is trauma.
Yeah.
And it is part of the residual effect of all that has happened because of what Brock did to her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's also really fascinating to watch her, like in the earlier portion of the book, like no one could really tell her what happened to her for quite some time. And so she's left she's like reading online articles about herself and like reading comments. And I'm like, oh, girl, like I think that's the number one thing any like famous person would tell you, don't read the comments. But like she doesn't know, and she doesn't like she has to know what happened to her, just like anyone would. And so she's reading comments and articles and like, I don't know, did that happen? And it's like, I think that's probably the most heartbreaking thing is because it was already an active investigation when she said, yes, I want to press charges less than 24 hours later.
Without knowing any of the implications of what that meant.
Without knowing anything. And no one could tell her what happened to her because now they're influencing like the evidence or the story or whatever. And there's so much that goes with that. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, she's just a human trying to figure this shit out that happened to her that's really fucked up. And so I think that's also like what's so gutting to me. Because if like, oh man, like her sister Tiffany, shout out girl, you like supported her so well and advocated for her and still continued to be successful in school, like, which is crazy to me. And she has her own traumas she's working through. Like as a sister, like that would literally gut me, like to know something happened like that and like not be able to like try and find the facts. It's just like unreal.
Well, and the guilt too. Like she talks about the guilt that her sister felt that she left the party without her, or the guilt that her mom felt. Oh, that's getting me. The guilt that her mom felt because she took them to the party, or the guilt that her boyfriend felt because he was the last person to talk on the phone with her, or the guilt that the men that she calls the Swedes, who were the two Swedish men that found her behind the dumpster and chased Brock Turner down, that they didn't come 5 minutes sooner.
Yeah.
Something like this ripples across a community, you know, like it's not just one time the way that Brock's people talked about it being just one time, being just one thing. Like it has affected and changed all these lives. Period. And that's why there's a conviction. That's why there's consequences. That's why it's so infuriating when we see Brock Turner say that he apologizes, but that he doesn't admit guilt.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the things that she hits on is that he says that he's sorry, but that he is not guilty. That's not being sorry. Like that's covering your ass. Like that's trying to make yourself look more like digestible to a jury. And we consistently see him manipulating the truth in that way. Even when they talk about him being an upstanding citizen, you hear about how he had a run with the police for having alcohol underage just a couple months before this incident. We hear about how he and his friends would talk about doing all sorts of drugs in high school and in college, even though he claimed on the stand that he did not do drugs, that he was trying to form like an anti-alcohol club. Yeah. And it's like, that's a load of crap.
It's such a load.
And then we also hear about other girls that came forward and said, he actually tried to do this to me, but like luckily we were able to fend him off and like dissuade him at other parties. And that's one of the things Chanel talks about as well, is how sometimes people ask her if she thinks like, why me? And she's like, no, I'm glad it was me, because if it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. Like what other girl would he have preyed on at that party or at another party? Like
she's like, this was a problem.
Yeah.
This was not
because he even tried to make moves on her sister and multiple other women at the party.
I mean, he kissed her sister.
Yes.
Unconsentingly. That's already sexual assault.
Yes.
So, yeah, to call it a one-off event and to act like he cared about consent when he very clearly just violated some other woman.
He would just feel out how much he could do and get away with.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is like, ugh.
Yeah. So
Bro.
whatever upstanding citizen, that's not even a thing.
Yeah.
That's not even a thing. One of the things I wanted to like pull out from her book was she talked about kind of after the assault happened, getting home and being with her family and kind of being able to sleep. And this was maybe one of the few times that she was, but she talks about her grandpa who used to tell her about the migration patterns of geese.
Cute.
I love this analogy.
And so the birds at the front had the hardest job. And so then when they get tired, they move to the back to rest while the other birds move to the front. And so she said this was the only way to make the journey, to escape winter and make it to warmer places. I had spent 2 weeks pumping my wings, keeping a calm face to protect my flock from brutal conditions. But resilience required rest. For the next 8 months, I was going to fall back. The most important thing to remember was that to be at the rear, to be slower, did not mean that you were not a leader. And so I think that to me communicates her strength and that she could recognize her limitations. And I'm sure it's not easy to do in the moment when you feel like I can't get out of bed for the third time this week and I have nothing in front of me except my pain, you know. But to recognize, okay, like I just faced the most brutal parts of winter here with my flock, my family. Even the idea of her having these people around her gets me emotional, you know, like her family and her friends that supported her through this, and not very many because she didn't tell very many people, but that she was able to recognize falling back was a part of her strength. And that is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite analogies that she gave in the book. Of these, just it's a beautiful illustration of leadership and what it looks like to really be strong. And she talks about strength quite a few times in the book, and talks about how like true strength, true masculinity was the Swedes like confronting Brock Turner.
Yep.
It was not Brock Turner's assertion of his masculinity onto her. Or how you see like the tenderness of Lucas, her boyfriend, as he like carries her through this whole trial and carries her so gently and treats her with care and recognizes the potential in her.
Yep.
When everyone else is recognizing the potential in Brock Turner, Lucas looks at her and says, look at you.
Yeah.
You have so much. And even when you're in your lowest point, there is so much that's worthy in you. And it's stunning. Or we even see, this was like surprising to me. She's talking to a friend on the phone. She finally like told one of her friends that she is Emily Doe, the woman who was assaulted by Brock Turner. And her friend is a Christian, and he like prays for her and says, God, I know that she has the strength to get through this. He doesn't ask God for the strength for her to get through this, but tells God he knows that she has it. And so you see these people in her life that see the strength that she has when she's painted as both weak and also capable in the trial. She's painted as basically whatever will favor them the most. But speaking of analogies that are great, I would love to read another one of her analogies.
Do it.
If that's okay. So I love analogies. And one of the ones that I love, this is a little bit of a shift, but she is actually talking about how there's a period of time over the summer after she gets sexually assaulted that she moves to Providence, Rhode Island, of all places. And she does this printmaking intensive and essentially does art for a summer. And she talks about this slew of catcalling that happens to her throughout this time. She doesn't have a car, and so she's walking everywhere she goes, and she is being constantly harassed on the street. So here's the analogy. It's a little bit long, so bear with me. Imagine you're walking down the street eating a sandwich and someone says, "Damn, that looks like a delicious sandwich. Can I have a bite?" You'd think, why would I ever let you eat this sandwich? This is my sandwich. So you'd walk on and continue eating. And they'd say, "What? You're not going to say anything? No need to get mad. I was just trying to compliment your sandwich." Let's say this happened 3 times a day. Strangers stopping you on the street, letting you know how good your food looks, asking if they can have some of it. What if people started yelling out of their cars about how much they wanted your sandwich? "Let me have some," they'd exclaim, driving by with a honk. Were you supposed to say, "I'm sorry, no thank you," every single time? Would you feel obligated to explain over and over again that you don't wish to share it because it's your lunch and you don't know them? That you don't owe them any of it? That it's a little unreasonable that they're asking in the first place? All you'd want is to walk down the street eating your sandwich in peace. Maybe I'm making this worse by comparing a woman's body to a sandwich, but do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I love this analogy because I think that often the response that I hear as people learn about the catcalling that women receive is that it's harmless or that it's no big deal. Or like, why is that upsetting you? Why are you getting riled up about that? And it's those like simple, small acts of aggression that lead to things like the incident with Brock Turner. And it's also this idea that a woman's body is okay to objectify that leads to an incident like the sexual assault Brock Turner committed. Mm-hmm. And I think that her turning it around into this sandwich analogy, even in and of itself, objectifies women. Because the thing is the only way to explain the objectification is to illustrate objectification happening. And it sounds so funny and ridiculous when you hear it that way. Like, who would just say that? Like, when you're walking down the street eating a sandwich.
You might like a bag of that sandwich.
Yeah,
like, no.
And then when you're like, you look at someone like they're totally ridiculous for asking for a bite of your sandwich when you don't even know them, and they get offended for it. It's like, yes, that is the proper social response, is to be offended and weirded out when somebody makes an unsolicited comment about your sandwich.
And thank you, Chanel. I actually think the way that she reacts to some of these catcallers and describes her things like is so validating to me.
Yes.
And I want that moment in some ways. Like, sometimes it feels like she talks about, I mean, like, I've never lived in a place where catcalling is that common. But, like, being able to just be like, I have heard this daily, multiple times a day, every time I walk home by multiple different men, and you are the one that's going to receive the anger when I crack.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's almost like, why are we absorbing all this anger in the first place? Like, we have every right to be angry at the first one,
yes.
and the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. Like, why does it take a summer of being harassed for someone to be able to finally feel the freedom to fight back? That's what frustrates me.
Well, and that's the problem, right? It's like women are expected to just take it. And like, I love how we watch her literally become unhinged at a certain point and just like wild woman, like scream. And I'm like, yes, actually. Like, I can't tell you how good that would feel. Like, to just go off on some man thinking that, oh, this is a casual, no big deal thing. And I'm like, it's not actually. It's unacceptable and you should never do it again. And let me tell you and give you an experience to discourage you from that in the future. Yeah. And I'm like, girl, you go for it. Yeah. I think every woman needs to just unhinge a little bit. And I think our society would be a lot more polite, actually.
But here's the thing, men are that way.
That's true.
If you look
they get to blow up.
If you look at a man the wrong way in the street, he feels every right to like come at you aggressively.
Yep.
Yeah.
And say, "What's your problem, man?"
Yep.
If a woman does it, she's crazy. She's unhinged. She's way too sensitive. She's hysterical, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Well, and what you see at the end of that unhinged moment is her and her friends, as they're yelling at these men in their car, realize the power dynamic and they leave, right? They get scared. And I think that's also fair because there is a power dynamic. Yeah. There is a differential that tells women you will not be believed or you will be blamed for this if something happens.
Yeah.
Or these men are stronger than you, they're bigger than you. They have already been told their entire lives that they're more powerful than you.
And that they're entitled to you.
And that they are entitled to your body. And so they run away. And it's like semi-anticlimactic, but it's also very reasonable.
Yeah.
Because women are also told that you're responsible for looking out for your safety instead of expecting other people to treat you like a human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a mess. And so to pivot a little bit, I'm curious, what critiques do you have of the book? I know we all love the book, but no book is perfect, right?
I mean, I don't have very many. Actually, I just kind of have one.
Okay.
And it's more like after the trial wraps, I felt like she was intentionally connecting a bunch of different things, and I kind of got lost. And it's not that those things didn't matter or that they weren't connected. It's that she just didn't fully like iron it out, or something felt a little, the last few chapters just felt a little discombobulated to me. I almost felt like maybe we switched topics and I was reading a little bit of a different book. So that is, I think, my one and only critique, actually.
I have to say I actually agree with you, Kellyanne, in that the last bit of the book felt a bit like it was dragging. The last bit felt like, okay, I literally audibly exclaimed when she opened up a chapter with several months after the trial, Donald Trump was elected to the presidency. I was like, what? And I'm pretty sure my roommates probably thought I was crazy. They knew I was in my room reading. And I'm in there like, what?
She's reading some book. What's going on?
Yeah. And so I love that she went there. And there were some really great comparisons that she drew. But I do think that it felt a little like it was like the air had left a little bit under the wings of the book, you know? Like I was sort of like, oh, I feel like I'm on a down slope and it's taking me a little too long to get down. And so that was my biggest critique, because I feel like there was so much care in the way that she led up to the book. And I think part of this also, like, if you don't read, like, the acknowledgments at the end and the afterword and the Emily Doe statement that's at the end, then maybe it doesn't feel as long. But even before I got to the afterword, I was like, okay, like, where are we going with this? We need to land the plane a little bit. Even though there were great points she made, it was like,
yeah,
maybe you should write like another book about this.
Please write another book.
Yeah, but I agree with you. It almost felt like her editor came back and was like, it's too short. That's what it almost felt like to me. And it seemed like she did the best she could. And again, I agree with you. Like, she was making good points, and I'm like, I'm in it with you, but also this is harder. So,
yeah, that was never something that I noticed. I also read the book like freely on my own time on vacation. And so like I didn't feel the same deadline maybe that you guys felt trying to finish it up and be like, okay, come on, Chanel. So I don't know. Maybe with a little bit less of a deadline, I was just like, oh yeah, more interesting stuff. I mean, I was gripped the whole way through. I think my one critique, and this isn't really a critique, I don't know what you could call it, but I wish that the book didn't have to clarify that so often, that Brock is a human too, and we don't want the worst for him.
Really?
And I think
it's interesting.
I think there's value there. I'm not saying that's a bad thing to say or to clarify, and I think everyone understands why it's there. But to me, it's the requirement that it be there. It's the obligation that we justify a rape victim telling her own story with, but I don't demonize or hate the rapist. That bothers me. And this is, I mean, that's for Chanel, like, that's her thing. That's not on me. But I feel like we all, like, women often, or almost always, are required to curb or soften how we feel about things. Or we're expected to curb injustice or kind of, like, soften the blow, it feels. And I'm not saying that's what she's trying to do. But I just feel like, to me, the fact that he even gets more airtime or that it even has to be clarified that the victim is not looking for his
Your
ultimate demise. You know what I mean? Because like Brock didn't take that into consideration when he raped her. You know what I mean? Like Brock Turner doesn't say that in any of his statements or any of his like defenses. Like he's not being like, I recognize that you are a human being and deserve a good life. Like that never happens. And so to me, again, not necessarily a critique of the writing, but more the society that requires that to be said bothers me. That it's not implicit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think I thought of it that way. I thought of it more like, wow, like look at what a like whole person she is, or empathetic. I don't know. I thought of it in a very like admirable thing, but I'm also like realizing as you say it, like we're supposed to admire that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, maybe I'm like rethinking my thought process on that.
That's what I'm saying is like, what if nothing was said? What if she doesn't say yay or nay, whether or not, like, how she feels toward him or whatever? Like, what if all it's actually about is whether people can get justice or not? And again, I know that's, like, maybe even a bigger conversation or whatever, but I feel like the obligation in our culture for a victim to have to justify that they don't want harm to come to the perpetrator. It's like when the perpetrator is the one who did the harm. I don't know. That's just something that bothers me in general.
I will say, I think I get where you're coming from with that, and I can see how it can feel a bit like she's pandering towards this idea that that we must make sure that you don't dehumanize the rapist, or make sure that you recognize that you're going to be, you know, this bigger person. But I really, really valued the times where she talked about how she didn't want to stoop to his level of dehumanizing. Like she didn't want to stoop to his level of lying. And I think at the same time, she does, in a very poignant way, illustrate the rage felt by a victim. She talks about how furious she was after the sentencing and how wronged she felt. But I think that one of the quotes that I loved in the book is that she said that anger is often the secondary emotion. The primary emotion was pain. And I think that she taps into that pain really well.
I agree.
And that she looks through the anger. She acknowledges the anger for what it really was for her, which was this deep, deep pain and sorrow, and all the complexities that came along with that. And so while she talked about wanting to literally like chop Brock Turner's dick off, like because she was so angry, reading his statements and reading what his lawyer had said in court, and as she saw the blatant lies and the gaslighting and the manipulation, she at the same time recognized that yes, he is more than this. He is more than a rapist, but he is also a rapist. And I really liked that about how she told the story. I will say that in that vein, I think there were some times where she was a bit redundant.
Yeah, and that's what I'm touching on here. I'm not saying that it doesn't need to be said or that it doesn't need to be acknowledged. Like I mean, we're doing this podcast and it's like everything is about acknowledging the humanity of others. To me, it's like, do we have to really remind people again and again? By the way, he's a human. Like, and again, I agree. Like, we're not trying to stoop to his level where he's not acknowledging her humanity. But
won't
also
even look at her.
But I feel like we on this podcast have to do that. We have to pander. We have to say these injustices, blah, 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 blah. But with that, we recognize that it's not all men, and men are harmed by the patriarchy too, and we don't hate them.
Yeah.
You know, like, and the fact that it's required that you have to add all of these like addendums onto an injustice bothers me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like saying Black Lives Matter, and then people being like, well, all lives matter. And it's like, yes, obviously, we know, like, everyone's life matters, but we're talking about this right now.
Yeah.
And we're trying to rectify this wrong, which is that people have for so long thought that Black lives don't matter.
Yeah.
my final critique
Kelly
Mhm.
is not about her writing, but about what happened in the end with Stanford. Absolute disaster, catastrophe.
Uh-huh.
As an institution of education,
Yep.
they should be ashamed. They should be absolutely ashamed. And I didn't want, who wants it to be that way? But like, I thought because they are progressive and forward thinking and a shining star in the realm of education that they would do better. No. It's still an institution that has a bottom line, that needs to make money, that is a business, and that comes first. And I think that is devastating. Like, just realizing, like, oh, actually, almost all institutions aren't better.
Oh, yeah.
They're not. And, like, also seeing how she's handled, again, by other women, and, like, that quote is too harsh. It's like, excuse me, we're not trying to, victimize other people. We're not trying to trigger them. We're not, motherfucker. Like, you built a garden to commemorate the space I was sexually assaulted on your campus. Put my quote on the damn plaque and move on. Like, no. Like, and then they put in, like, they make very minimal changes to essentially appease her, and they basically give her hush money. And because she's been going through this horrific experience for, I forget how much time, but she's unemployed. She's going to therapy for very obvious reasons. Her sister needs therapy. Like, this is like a long, drawn out process that will literally destroy lives. And it's like, yeah, I'll take the $150,000. Like, they need it. And again, Stanford took a low blow at someone who needed it to get their way.
Do you think she shouldn't have taken the Stanford deal?
I think she should have gotten more.
Like she should have negotiated?
She should have negotiated because they were afraid of a lawsuit. A lawsuit would have cost them millions.
Yeah. But she also wasn't in a position to file a lawsuit.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's super fair. I think
Yeah.
she deserved some form of compensation, but they also should have followed through on their end of
Yeah.
the deal.
I actually will say, when it comes to the idea of her pandering to something, the thing that felt the most like that to me was her talking about the Stanford deal.
Yep.
And how it felt to me like she felt the need to include the reasons why she took the deal in order to make sure that she wasn't called out as a victim just seeking money.
Yeah.
And that was, I felt a lot of sympathy for her in that moment as I read that part, because I think that she's so afraid of getting attacked once again by people on the internet and mean people in comment sections, that she felt the need to really outline, I got this money to help my family. I got this money so my sister could go to therapy. I got this money and put it into a savings account and didn't even touch it because she felt so much pressure to justify it. And to me, I'm like, oh, I hate that you felt that pressure.
It sucks that you even would have to justify it.
Yeah.
If you're a victim, you don't, like, there's nothing wrong with seeking retribution.
Yes.
Seeking retribution is a very natural, normal thing that is built into our very justice system because it is part of how you make amends.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so, like, the idea that, like, I mean, Christine Blasey Ford got all this flack when she came forward against Brett Kavanaugh. I was like, oh, you're just in it for the money, or you're just trying to gain affluence. Or it was like, no.
Yeah.
But even if she was, that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, if you've been sexually assaulted and you have an opportunity to gain financial compensation for the damage that has been done to your life, you deserve that. And that is a normal, honorable thing to do and to expect.
Yeah. And she actually has a really great quote about that, speaking of, on page 291, because there's this idea that someone's coming forward to talk about sexual assault or abuse just for attention or money or to defame that other person. But she says, He may sit in a cell, but he will never know what it's like to be unhomed from his own body. We do not fight for our own happy endings. We fight to say you can't. We fight for accountability. We fight to establish precedent. We fight because we pray we'll be the last ones to feel this kind of pain. And she talks about how the reason women stay behind closed doors for so long after sexual assault is because of the fear of the retribution they'll face. And they come forward because it can't be lived with any longer.
Mm-hmm.
They come forward because they are thinking about the community of women that is being affected by these people's actions.
Mm-hmm.
And then we even see, as she talks about cases like Cosby, like Brett Kavanaugh, like Donald Trump, where there's a cacophony of women that come forward, and only then do people start to recognize the wrong that's been done. Only once 20, 50, 60 women come forward and say, this person harmed me, do they acknowledge it.
But even then, it's assumed that at least 40% of them are lying.
Yes. And it's honestly, it's a really potent illustration to me that it takes 60 women's bodies to even confront the harm that one man's body has done. So what is the value there? 60 to 1? Like, it is absolutely insane, and it illustrates the way that women are so devalued. Even though there may be all this talk about the ways that women are equal to men and the ways that we have this beautiful, like, just and utopian society and how the United States is the best country in the world and all these things, we still have 60 women that it takes for a man to face any repercussions.
It's like, how many licks does it take to get the center of a life? How many women does it take for a man to get put in prison for sexual assault?
Yes.
60.
Yeah. And and that's the thing. It's when there's overwhelming evidence.
Yeah.
When it really should be when there is a hint of evidence that needs to be scrutinized. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really awful. Closing us out today, ladies.
I'm fired up.
I know. What are your final takeaways from the book? What are the last excerpts that you must share? What are the nuggets of Chanel wisdom that you want to make sure the listeners,
there's
the woman
so much
beings,
Chanel wisdom.
I mean,
she's just
brilliant.
Absolutely genius.
Absolutely.
Like, I want to go see her exhibit at the San Francisco Asian Art Museum.
Let's go.
I want to go
I wanna
read
hear her
all of her
speak.
books. Yeah, I want to hear her speak. I want to watch her 60 Minutes interview. I want to do all the things. I want to go see her do a comedy set. She is a Renaissance woman, let me tell
know.
you.
Really is. Final takeaways. All right. I think my favorite one-liner from the book is, I believe out of millions who knew I was brave and important, I was the last to know it. And I think this is unfortunately very common for women because we are not afforded the same opportunities, or we're spoken to differently, or in the case of this trial, like, it doesn't matter how much evidence or witnesses there was. It's always like, well, all these other things. But the truth is, every woman is vitally important. And we see that as she receives an outpouring of letters of support and encouragement and gratitude from other women around the world. And I felt as I was reading this, I felt the true connectedness we as women all have. And that how we really pull on each other's strength and really lift each other up. That's why I think that's one of the reasons I'm so against, like, female competition in general, is like, no, we actually really need each other, because actually I believe we can't be our best without each other. And Chanel has masterfully taken a truly awful situation and just risen from the ashes, essentially. And that is an inspiration to other women. My other quote that I would like to read is from the very end of the book. And it says, "Only Emily Doe. I survived because I remained soft, because I listened, because I wrote, because I huddled closely to my truth, protected it like a tiny flame in a terrible storm. Hold up your head when the tears come, when you are mocked, insulted, questioned, threatened, when they tell you you are nothing, when your body is reduced to openings. The journey will be longer than you imagined. Trauma will find you again and again. Do not become the ones who hurt you. Stay tender with your power. Never fight to injure, fight to uplift. Fight because you know that in this life you deserve safety, joy, and freedom. Fight because it is your life, not anyone else's. I did it. I am here. Looking back, all the ones who doubted or hurt or nearly conquered me fade away. And I am the only one standing. So now the time has come. I dust myself off and go on. And I think she really beautifully articulates the journey and the process. And I think a lot of people resonate with that when it comes to sexual assault, but also outside of, I think, any type of trauma, abuse, which unfortunately the majority of people have experienced. And that gives you something to look forward to.
That's a good one.
It's a good one.
That was one of my favorite quotes. It's so good. One of the things that really struck me was how she's talking about, towards the end of the book, all these other events that are happening. We have the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. We have Donald Trump's election. We have Philando Castile's murder. And she says on page, I don't know, she has, if punishment is based on potential, privileged people will be given lighter sentences. Brock was shielded inside projections of what people like him grow up to become, or are supposed to become. Orthopedic surgeon, biomedical engineer, all-American athlete, Olympian. The judge argued he'd already lost so much, given up so many opportunities. What happens to those who start off with little to lose? Instead of a 19-year-old Stanford athlete, let's imagine a Hispanic 19-year-old working in the kitchen of the fraternity commits the same crime.
Yep.
Does his story end differently? Does the Washington Post call him a surgeon? My point can be summed up in the line Brock wrote. I just existed in a reality where nothing can go wrong or nobody could think of what I was doing as wrong. Privilege accompanies the light-skinned, helped maintain his belief that consequences did not apply to him. And that's the thing, is that while this trial is so much about these lies, it's about these double standards towards women, it's also about race and privilege. Brock comes from a background where he's told his entire life that he's going to succeed. And because of that, he can't believe that one measly rape would keep him from succeeding. Meanwhile, someone who is told by society that they actually cannot succeed, that their success is against all odds. If that person had committed the same crime, the trial would have been entirely different. The judge would have had a totally different sentencing. And that reality is so unfair and so unjust in our quote-unquote criminal justice system. And that really hit me in sort of bringing it into reality more for me. While obviously all of this story is very much so in reality, as it's about real life events, this idea of like, okay, this is all wrapping up together and I'm seeing all the intersections here. And I'm seeing all of the ways that our viewpoint on other human beings as a nation, as a society, as a culture, have led to something like Brock Turner's sentencing. And it's tragic, but I think that she beautifully connects it to those other events and recognizes it in that way. So that was one of the things that was really, really potent to me. One other thing, just to give a little something else. I love this one. So the judge who did the sentencing on her case was eventually recalled in 2018.
Good.
Yes. And so he was recalled. He is no longer a judge in the state of California, thank goodness. But she recounts a quote from him in the San Francisco Chronicle on page 321 of the Kindle edition. I have the page this time. She says, or he says, women are frustrated by how they are treated by society, how they are treated by the criminal justice system. That passion is genuine. It needs to be expressed. And then she adds in, expressed was the wrong word. We, the victims, are tired of expression. I expressed a lot in his courtroom. The word we need is acknowledged, taken into account, taken seriously. And that's the thing. I feel like so often women are told, okay, we've heard you, but you've not taken what I've said seriously. You've not digested all of this information and truly acted upon it. Like, you have heard me, quote unquote, but you have not really listened. And that was really good to me, because I think that people will also say, we've even gotten in our comment section, people saying, well, like, you're just angry, or people discounting what we have to say, or saying that what we have to say is ridiculous. And the reason why we're still, quote unquote, expressing ourselves is because we haven't been listened to.
To close me out, my final takeaways, I have two quotes, like the rest of you as well. Well,
all the rest of us.
222. And so this is after, or in the midst of jury selection. She's sitting with her family. She's processing all of this craziness that's happening. And she writes, over dinner, my dad told me he was proud of me. I'm so proud of you, sweetie, truly proud. When he said this, I never responded. It never absorbed. I was almost irritated, dismissive of his unfounded comment. Proud of what? The large gap between his pride and my current reality embarrassed me. Didn't he see me in my pajamas, shuffling around the house? I got assaulted. There are no trophies for that. What dignity is there in being discarded half naked? I smiled, but said nothing. And that, I think this ties in a little bit to the earlier quote that I shared about the bird analogy and going to the back of the line, is that our culture values certain things, right? We value high test scores and sports stats, right? We don't value people who actually go through really traumatic, difficult things and come out on the other side. And so, like, her process of being able to get through something like this at all is something to be proud of. It is something to say, I am resilient for, and I'm resolute, and I will not be crushed, I suppose. And so I thought that was really sweet. And I also just love her family and the way she describes them in this book in general. But the last quote to close us out was, this is one thing we didn't really discuss yet in the review, but in addition to being assaulted herself, Chanel has a just terrible background of like being in a high school where multiple kids commit suicide throughout her life. And she writes about being at a university where a man feels slighted by women in general and decides to like walk around school killing them with a gun. She's writing about this event that happened, and it says the police found 548 rounds of unspent ammunition inside his car that he had never had time to use. This is the shooter. 6 classmates had been stolen from us. Elliot, who is the murderer, the 7th. I do not include the victims' names here, for names are sacred, and I do not want them to be identified solely by what he did to them. And I felt like that small little quote sort of encapsulates this book, and the purpose of it is that throughout the trial, Chanel is kind of under this anonymous identity of Emily Doe. And it's all about Brock. And this book feels like it is the coming forward. It is the declaration that my name is sacred, and you will know the person that is me outside of what someone did to me.
Yeah.
But I'm not also going to deny that. And so I'm going to walk you through my telling of events, and I'm going to walk you through who I am as a person. And so I don't know. I really liked her philosophy on that, and the way that she. I don't know, it was like a half quote. Like it's barely even a thing in the book, but to me it was like, oh, like that's what this book is for.
Mm-hmm.
It is her honoring herself.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was very beautiful.
Yeah.
But I digress. Kellyanne and Emma,
Kelly.
thank you so much for reviewing this book with me. Drinking some sparkling water with lemon,
It's
Cheers.
aka gin and
it's
tonic
bad
from a
luck.
can.
Is it?
It's bad luck to cheers an empty glass.
Oh,
I shouldn't have done
sorry.
that to you guys.
knock on wood. Yeah, no, this is such a great book. I appreciate you guys reading through it. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed it. For all the women beings out there that listen to this episode all the way through without having read the book, crazy, but go read it.
Yeah, I don't know why you would do that.
I don't know.
but
It's like
definitely-
spoilers.
if you haven't read it, yeah, spoilers. And
But-
also, you definitely should. We did not spoil enough for you to not enjoy the book.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we can't replace her prose. Like
No.
we just
Yeah.
can't. And there's so many stories in there that we didn't even get to touch on. But
So much.
woman beings, those lovely people listening, you are some of our favorite people, and you can, if you don't already, interact with us on social media. We are on TikTok and Instagram at Woman Being Podcast, and we love the comments, the DMs, the suggestions, the recommendations, and have actually structured so many episodes around different questions that you've had or things that you've suggested we talk about, and that is really fun, is to kind of learn and grow together. So do that, and then also make sure that if you have not yet, that you leave us a review. If you support the work that we're doing and you appreciate the type of content that we are delivering, a review is one of the ways that you can really support what we do. So that would be greatly appreciated. And with that being said, I wish you a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.